Welcome to Global Trends. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. Let's talk trade, a topic that just got a lot more interesting and a lot more complicated almost overnight. The conversation reignited in a big way when President Trump, during his second term, unleashed a fresh wave of tariffs targeting Canada, one of America's closest trading partners. A massive 25% tariff slammed down on Canadian cars, steel and aluminum heading south, sending shockwaves through both economies. Think of a tariff as a surprise cover charge at your favorite pub. Suddenly, Canadian goods cost more just to get in the door. That extra cost doesn't just vanish, it's passed on to businesses and eventually to you, the consumer. Trump argued these tariffs would protect American jobs and industries, making U.S. products cheaper and foreign ones pricier. The hope was to give American factories a fighting chance. The idea was simple: force Americans to buy American, boosting U.S. manufacturing and keeping jobs at home. It was a bold move, meant to reignite the spirit of American industry. But here's the catch: the U.S. and Canadian economies aren't separate at all. They're deeply intertwined, with businesses and workers on both sides relying on each other. Parts and products cross the border multiple times before they're finished, weaving a complex web of trade that's hard to untangle. For example, a car part might be made in Ontario, shipped to Ohio for assembly, and then sold back in Canada. This back and forth is the backbone of North American manufacturing. These tariffs didn't just tax finished goods, they disrupted a complex supply chain, making it harder for companies to plan, produce, and deliver. Suddenly, businesses on both sides of the border faced chaos and uncertainty. Small businesses in particular struggled to keep up with rising costs and shifting rules. It was the economic equivalent of building a wall and making your neighbor pay for it, except this wall blocked opportunity and growth. Instead of a simple win-lose scenario, the move threatened to hurt both economies, putting jobs and livelihoods at risk on both sides. The stage was set for a major trade showdown, with the world watching to see who would blink first. The impact was immediate and painful. Almost overnight, the hum of industry faded into silence, leaving communities across North America reeling from the shock. Canadian steel production plunged 30% in spring 2025, a drop not seen in decades, sending shockwaves through the entire supply chain. Factories went quiet, orders vanished, and layoffs followed. For many, the security of a steady job disappeared in a matter of weeks. Unemployment ticked up, hitting thousands of families. Households that once felt stable now faced tough choices about bills, groceries, and the future. The pain rippled out. Truck drivers, miners, and local businesses all felt it. Small towns already struggling saw even fewer customers and shuttered storefronts, but the tariffs backfired in the U.S. too. American workers and business owners soon realized they weren't immune to the fallout. American manufacturers relying on Canadian materials saw costs soar. Suddenly, making cars, appliances, and machinery became much more expensive. Products like washing machines and trucks got pricier, squeezing profits or raising prices for consumers. Shoppers noticed the difference at the checkout. Instead of a simple America wins scenario, both sides suffered. The border became a symbol of shared hardship, not victory. U.S. job growth slowed dramatically, with only 22,000 jobs added in August 2025. Hopes for a quick recovery faded as the months dragged on. Wall Street grew anxious as the trade war fueled economic uncertainty. Investors watched nervously as markets dipped and forecasts darkened. The lesson: starting a trade war with your biggest partner is messy for everyone. Negotiations grew tense and trust between nations eroded. It wasn't a strategic chess match, it was chaos. Every move seemed to make things worse, not better. Both economies stumbled, and the fallout was just beginning. The sense of uncertainty lingered, with no clear end in sight. The stakes had never been higher for workers on both sides of the border. Their livelihoods and their communities hung in the balance. Into this storm stepped Mark Carney, Canada's new Prime Minister. Carney, a former central banker, campaigned on standing up to Trump. Canadians wanted a defender, not just a diplomat. The old playbook of quiet cooperation was out. Carney's mandate was to fight for Canadian jobs. He called the tariffs a rupture in the relationship, not just a disagreement. The pressure was on. Factories idled, workers watched, and Carney had to act fast. His challenge: respond forcefully without escalating into all-out economic war. Supporters saw him as the right leader for the moment. Critics feared he'd provoke harsher U.S. measures. But Carney was undeterred. He was elected to defend Canada. The first test of his leadership had arrived. His response would define his premiership. The country waited for his next move. On September 5, 2025, Mark Carney stepped forward with a bold answer to mounting economic pressures, a sweeping Buy Canadian strategy. The announcement, made in front of a sea of red and white flags, was more than just policy. It was a rallying cry for national resilience and economic independence. Under this new plan, government agencies across the country would now be required to prioritize Canadian suppliers for all public projects, from infrastructure to technology and beyond. This redirection of billions in public spending meant that contracts once awarded to foreign firms would now flow directly into the hands of Canadian businesses, fueling local industries and keeping money circulating within the national economy. In total, about $70 billion in government procurement would now be steered toward Canadian companies, representing a massive shift in economic policy and a significant opportunity for domestic growth. The move was a direct response to America's own Buy American laws, essentially mirroring the protectionist stance taken by the U.S. in recent years. Carney's message was clear. If the U.S. was intent on building walls, then Canada would focus on strengthening its own house, ensuring its foundation was solid and its people protected. New procurement rules were fast-tracked through Parliament, aiming to create a stable, predictable market for Canadian companies and to encourage innovation and investment at home. For struggling steelmakers and manufacturers, a government contract could mean the difference between layoffs and expansion, a vital lifeline in uncertain times. Critics called the plan protectionist, and in many ways, it was. But for Carney and his supporters, it was a necessary response to a rapidly changing global landscape. The Buy Canadian strategy marked a decisive shift, from decades of deep integration with the U.S. to a new era of self-reliance and national focus in Canada-U.S. relations. The goal was ambitious: to create jobs, support local businesses, defend the economy, and inspire a renewed sense of Canadian pride and purpose. It was a clear signal to the world: Canada would not be a passive victim of global trade wars, but an active defender of its own interests. The Buy Canadian plan quickly became the centerpiece of Carney's fightback, uniting politicians, business leaders, and workers behind a common cause. As the world watched, the trade war had a new front, and Canada was ready to defend its own. The Buy Canadian policy was just the start. Carney's government hit back with retaliatory tariffs, matching the U.S. blow for blow. American steel, aluminum, and cars now faced a 25% tariff entering Canada. The goal: pressure U.S. exporters to lobby for an end to the tariffs. It was risky. Canadian consumers and businesses would also pay more. But the hope was that short-term pain would force a long-term solution. Meanwhile, the government launched a $1 billion strategic response fund. This direct aid helped hard-hit businesses retool, find new markets, and keep workers employed. Emergency loans were offered to small and medium-sized firms struggling with the shock. The approach fight back against the U.S. while supporting Canadian workers. It was a high-stakes game of economic chicken. Both sides waited to see who would blink first. The trade war was now a test of endurance. Amid the trade war, Carney's government made a tough call, delaying Canada's zero-emissions vehicle mandate. The policy, a Trudeau legacy, required 20% of new cars sold in 2026 to be zero-emission. But with the auto sector under siege, Carney hit pause. He argued it wasn't abandoning climate goals, just being pragmatic. Forcing a rapid EV transition while fighting tariffs could cripple the industry. The delay was a necessary sacrifice to protect jobs and keep factories open. Environmental groups were disappointed, fearing a step backward. But auto industry leaders and unions welcomed the breathing room. The government insisted the green transition was still on, just postponed. The move showed the brutal trade-offs a trade war can force. For now, saving jobs took priority over climate targets. The economic crisis demanded flexibility. So, where does this leave North America? Two deeply linked economies are locked in a bitter trade fight. Tariffs and counter-tariffs are raising prices and fueling uncertainty. Workers face anxiety, and the future is more uncertain than ever. Yet behind the scenes, leaders are talking. Carney and Trump have had constructive conversations. Negotiators are working on a new deal for autos, steel, and aluminum. Both sides know a prolonged trade war is bad for everyone. Legal challenges to Trump's tariffs could upend the landscape. The old era of quiet Canada-U.S. trade is over, for now. Carney's bold stand signals a new, more assertive Canada. The coming months will be critical. Will compromise win, or will the trade war deepen? For now, all of North America waits and watches.